The people you had come to save are dead. They trusted you, and now they're gone. The duo untether a boat and escape from gunfire as one last victim bleeds away. Her father cradles her in his arms and bargains for her life, but it's too late. He didn't even know her. The corpses begin to blot out the shoreline as the perpetrators lose the very things they were killing to protect. And now the world is on fire, and there is no one left to see the ashes. The boat drifts further and further, aimlessly, until they're completely engulfed in the ever-reaching, ever-consuming blackness. This is the ending of Kane Lynch Dead Men, a mostly forgotten action game from 2007. I apologize for spoiling it for you if I did, but I'd be hard-pressed to say that a playthrough would be worth your time in 2022. The gameplay is stiff. Levels feel like they exist solely to serve the narrative, and generally go on long enough to become tedious. The final few are downright painful. Gunshots have a satisfying weight to them, but the endless waves of enemies make the levels almost nothing but clumsy skirmishes. If there's anything here to engage with, it's the story. Kane Lynch is a mafia story, but it stands out from the crowd due to what it focuses on. For example, many gangster stories follow a similar structure. A good-natured guy, down on his luck, starts doing odd jobs for a local gang or mafia group. He's a hard worker that shows promise and quickly rises through the ranks. After a few years of wise business decisions and ruthless tactics, he replaces the boss. He and his pals enjoy a life of gluttonous prosperity. Everywhere he goes, he is royalty, and he grows accustomed to people treating him as such. He eventually becomes more callous and punitive towards minor indiscretions. His ego gets in the way of his business, he betrays his friends, and he starts running out of bridges to burn. The police, so easily paid off in his youth, aren't as willing to turn a blind eye anymore. Everything he's ever done comes back to eat him. He will get arrested, die, or otherwise vanish, and a new figurehead will take his place, doomed to make the same mistakes. It's been my observation that many viewers tend to ignore this final act. They focus on the criminal high life and not the fall that immediately follows. These tragic conclusions are hard-coded into the essence of the story, but they're often overshadowed by everything that came before them. A clip of Tony Soprano intimidating a kid in a restaurant currently has more than 7 million views. The Sopranos is a cautionary tale, but it's also a show where entertaining characters do things many people wish they could. It encourages identification with the devil, so to speak. The audience has the entire length of these stories to sympathize with and root for these characters before everything takes a turn for the worse. It's an interesting choice, then, that Kane Lynch Dead Men is nothing but this third act. The glory days these characters had is never shown, if they even occurred at all. The narrative begins with Kane on death row. He's broken out of prison by his former criminal associates, the Seven, in order to recover the money he stole from them. It's vague, but the general consensus is that Kane left all of his former friends to die and robbed them blind at the first opportunity. He vehemently denies having done this. What really happened is not revealed. Had we stepped into Kane's life a little earlier, we would probably be more willing to side with him. After all, how many characters are able to gain sympathy just because the story follows their perspective? Beginning the game where it does eliminates any potential audience bias Kane might have accrued. As it stands, you have no real chance to romanticize these characters, because you only get to see them once they're in full decay. Maybe Kane was impressive once, but now he smokes discarded cigarettes that he finds on the floor. His partner Lynch has the emotional regulation of a small child. There's no witty dialogue or quotable one-liners to cling to. Every single character lacks convictions, and they constantly allow themselves to be pushed around. These hardened criminals bicker like school kids, but they won't actually stand up for themselves. The narrative even sets up situations for Kane to look impressive, only to immediately deflate them. The best example of this comes halfway through the game, where Kane has the opportunity to take revenge against Retamoto, the man that gave him his scar. Rappelling from the top of a skyscraper, the men detonate the window of the main floor. A barrage of bullets and shrapnel lays the entire conference hall to waste. The corpse of Retamoto, still clutching Kane's retirement money, lies slumped at the head of the table. His face hidden by a dark and weakening skyline, Kane runs a blade against Retamoto's eye. The revenge was indiscriminate, but Kane's practiced speech is privately whispered in the ear. This is the kind of scene that defines a character. When people think of Kane, they could think of a man standing gallantly over the broken frame of his former torturer. Except that this moment appears to have been deliberately ruined. The end of Kane's speech is rendered inaudible by Lynch loudly making fun of him.
What are you waiting for? Get the briefcase.
I owed you this for a long time. I paid my debts.
Come on, you're the one talking about keeping momentum and shit.
It's difficult to feel vicarious satisfaction from revenge if other characters consider it to be cringeworthy. Mix this with the knowledge that the duo accidentally killed Retamoto's daughter, and any cool factor is ripped from the scene. Kane just comes off like a bitter weirdo, muttering to himself or playing with the dead body. Where so many other examples of the genre will put effort into idolizing the protagonist, Dead Men puts the same amount of effort into deriding him. The main driving force of the narrative becomes getting revenge on the Seven and saving Kane's daughter, Jenny. She was kidnapped as a direct result of his actions, which is close to the only interaction she's ever had with him. She grew up while he was in prison, and he made no real attempts to contact her. Now that he's out, he tells everyone in earshot just how much he cares for her. However, his actions tell a different story. After the protagonists fail to recover the money within the Seven's time limit, Kane's family are condemned to death. His wife is executed, but he and Lynch retaliate before Jenny is harmed. Every assailant is killed, and Jenny is left trembling and non-communicative in an open grave. Kane makes a brief attempt at conversation before sending her off into the night by herself, despite multiple criminal groups looking for her. This is rather dubious, even to some of the supporting characters.
Sure that was a good idea? Sending her off like that?
I didn't have a choice, did I?
I don't know.
Most parents probably wouldn't let Jenny out of their sight under these circumstances, yet Kane doesn't bat an eye as she steps over 100 corpses with keys in hand. Unsurprisingly, she is immediately recaptured by the Seven and dragged into a war zone, an outcome that was not exactly difficult to see coming. The role of a careless parent is not new for Kane. Upon being downed in-game, the player will hear auditory flashbacks of events in the protagonist's life. One of these flashbacks includes Kane leaving a loaded gun lying around his house, which his infant son took to playing with. If you don't want to hear the outcome of this, skip ahead 30 seconds.
How could I let this happen? What the fuck is wrong with me?
Danny, sweetheart.
What the fuck is the matter with me? How could I let this happen?
What is wrong with you? Oh, you keep a gun at home. You promised. You fucking promised me.
Kane is the sort of person that you would do well to avoid, and this is exceedingly obvious to everyone who meets him. Each character he encounters throughout the story seems to take his presence as an omen of disaster. Every time he enters a person's life, he generally leaves it in ruins. Regardless of whether he actually wants a relationship with his daughter or not, she certainly doesn't. Other than killing her brother, the only knowledge Jenny has of her father has come from police reports and decimated highways. He's a dangerous stranger. When Kane does kill the Seven and arrives to rescue her again, he is indistinguishable from her kidnappers.
Get the fuck away from me, you murderer!
What? But why?
I said get the fuck away!
Jenny, I'm your father.
Shut up! I should fucking kill you! You abandoned us
Honey, I'm sorry.
for 14 years! Until we get dragged from bed and Mom gets shot because of some shit you've done!
It would have been very easy for the game to end with Jenny accepting her father's newfound humanity and leaving to start a new life together in a sugar-soaked happy ending. Instead, it opts for one of the most hopeless and dour conclusions I've ever seen in a mainstream production. The game's central theme is consequence. Any kind of positive resolution would have been dishonest. Kane doesn't know anything about his daughter, and every memory she has of him is likely traumatic. Their first narrative encounter involved her watching him massacre a football stadium's worth of people. She has no reason to give him the benefit of the doubt. The game has two endings, a sequence where Kane leaves everyone behind to escape with his daughter, and another where they attempt to rescue their comrades only to end up dying and rudderless. There is no resolution. No matter which you pick, every character reaches their lowest point and the narrative is cut off. You're left feeling hollow. Even a lot of horror games end with a sun-drenched Saturday morning, whereas an action game ends like Greek tragedy theatre. What's most impressive about this severe ending is that the narrative was able to arrive there so seamlessly. Kane's actions couldn't have led to any other conclusion. He wasted every opportunity, betrayed every friend, and now he is cursed from the earth. Is it not fitting that his attempts at redemption should be equally as half-hearted and ultimately rejected? That the world should not render unto him her cooperation or her strength? It has been remarked that Kane Lynch borrows strongly from the film Heat, as it shares many of the same locations and narrative threads. This is true. The set pieces of that film appear prominently in both games. However, there is one more literary work that Kane shows a crystal clear correlation to. When Retamoto carved a scar across Kane's eye, it's obvious what he was aiming to accomplish. Kane doesn't have any other visible deformities, indicating that it's probably not a byproduct of torture. His scar is a deliberate attempt to disfigure. The betrayer and the killer of the innocent can now be identified from a distance. It's difficult to do business when people on the other side of the world recognize your scar from the witness statements. This is identical to the fate of the character's namesake. Cain is named after the originator of murder from the Christian Bible. Cain from Genesis murders his more successful brother out of jealousy, hatred, and greed. God's decision is not to imprison or execute Cain, but to rend him out into the world. He is given a mark to prevent the people he encounters from killing him. The mark set upon Cain is that of the eternal leper, cast out to wander the earth as a fugitive and a vagabond. For Cain's punishment is not death, but meditation. He is kept in a permanent state of exile to think about what he's done. However, he appears to fail even this. The game opens with Cain writing a letter to Jenny, which reveals he's had 14 years to collect his thoughts on the subject. In all that time, he waited until the day of his execution to scrawl out a rushed, vague non-apology. He has barely written a paragraph when the guards escort him away. The one paragraph he did pen is contradictory to the point of nonsense, and whatever message he was attempting to convey is lost. Strangely enough, he mentions this letter multiple times throughout the narrative, and is still telling Jenny about it as the game draws to a close. His final words to her are an apology that the work isn't complete, indicating that the finished letter has the potential to exonerate him. There is no hint of a lie in his words. He genuinely believes that if she could see things from his perspective, his crimes would make sense. He would become sympathetic. We know differently. And that is the ultimate twist of the knife, the final perversion of justice. A character without redeeming qualities gets away and loses everything. Nobody wins. He doesn't learn a valuable lesson or finally redeem himself. He is deposited right back to where he started the narrative, having destroyed whatever support network he may have been able to build. Everything close to him is dead in the water. Of course, he remains in denial about his culpability. This is how we remember Kane. Not as a brave gangster standing up for his values. Not as a quick-witted rebel who made a few wrong moves, but as one that did nothing but damage, and did most of it accidentally. A bumbling destroyer of worlds. Creating a game this overtly nihilistic was a risk. It's not hard to imagine the developers second-guessing this ending, especially as more time and money was funneled into the project. But ultimately, they didn't compromise on their vision, and Kane's story is followed through to its natural conclusion. Kane Lynch Dead Men struggles as a video game, but as a classical tragedy, it is truly admirable. Its narrative and characters are far bleaker than what most studios would feel comfortable releasing, and the final product stands as a testament to the commitment of its creators. The ending of a narrative is the last piece an audience takes away, and likely the piece that will stay with them the longest. The conclusion operates as one final summary of the art as a whole. I cannot think of a better summary of Kane than the world sinking into a Stygian silence. He begins an excuse but trails off. The camera pulls away in its mechanical indifference, never allowing Kane to finish his dirge. With nothing left to kill or die for, we watch as he is carried, uncomprehending, into the void.